Okay, I am actually what I'm going to do first is make sure that everybody can see this screen. Can everybody see my screen? If you can, say yes. Okay, perfect. Because I know sometimes I've gone into a presentation and it's like I can't see anything. Okay, great. So we're going to go full on. Okay, and this is this you're going to see the bars at the side. I tend to do that if people are watching on mobile and things like that. So, welcome to my presentation. First off, I want to thank Francis for inviting me to speak at the Time Blocking Summit. Um, Definitely a different a change in what I was going to present initially, not in terms of the actual content, but you could probably tell my voice, and if you can't, um, I'm a little sick. I've got some sinusitis right now, so I've got my coffee, I've got my water. If I have to pause, I will chug some water. And the fascinating part about this is that while I usually tap into the power of theming my time, you're going to hear me talk about some different kinds of theming today. And I had to really focus on mode based work instead. A lot of low energy tasks over the last couple of days. But today, I want to talk to you about the power of theming your time. And to that end, when Francis and I chatted about this, I was heading off to, I think I was heading off to a conference in Austin. And there's a lot of different ways that people talk about time blocking, right? There's time chunking, which is something I mentioned before. And I think that the nice thing about the different ways that we're all the different strategies that you're all learning over the course of this entire summit, you're going to be able to take what works for you and use it. It's the old Bruce Lee adage, adopt what's useful, and discard what isn't, and then add your own. So while you're going to probably hear some elements of what I'm going to talk about in other people's presentations and vice versa, I think the key here is to understand that this is productivity is very personal. And so is time, really, because time moves on whether we want it to or not. I've been reading a lot more books lately related to time, like The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli. I'm reading Time Maps by, and I'm not going to say his name, but look up Time Maps. He's the same guy that wrote The 7 Week Circle. It starts with an E. I'll look it up for the Q&A, but it's a lot of scientific and physicist ways of looking at time, because let's face it, time moves on whether we want it to or not. So giving your time some kind of definition is really helpful, because you have to kind of merge tasks, the mindset of, the important mindset, which is focusing on the important stuff, which is a task-based mindset, but also, the urgent, the things that come up that we have to take care of, whether it's our boss giving us something that we have to do right away, or, if my kid was sick, or instead of me being at home, that's a urgent orientation. So I have to deal with time-based stuff there. So there's a nice meshing here. But productivity ultimately is very personal. And so what I want you to take out of this presentation is whatever works for you. And I'm going to give you different elements of theming your time that's worked for me over the years, and that I discuss in my upcoming book, Time Crafting, which is coming out this summer. I definitely want to just reinforce and stress that productivity is personal, and so will elements of this. So a little bit about this session. I kind of got into it a little bit already, but I'm going to go over the 5 elements that I use that are part of my time theming process. And when you think about my methodology called time crafting, there are basically 3 elements of it. There's the time theming component, there's mode-based work, and then there's the reflection and review component. Those are the 3 consistent elements that I talk about when I'm working on this. And in the book, one of the things I discuss is the idea of mindset, and then method, and then mastery. When I've done presentations like this before, and this is one of the things that you're not going to hear about so much in this session, is I'm usually dealing with participants or audience members that need a mindset change. Well, you're already signed up for this summit, so you already have in your head that time blocking is a strategy that you either are already using or that you want to know more about, and maybe even get more out of. So I'm not going to necessarily talk about the mindset stuff all that much. If you want to talk about that in the Q&A, we'll have time to do that, and you will have elements of mindset that you need to keep in mind as you move forward with the method. But I think in this case, we're going to get into the method stuff right away, as well as the idea of the mastery component. And that's the idea of just repetitive action, getting better at it, kind of that's why I call it time crafting. You're never really going to be completely done. An actor never says, well, that's me doing my hand thing. You are. That's it. I know everything I need to know about acting, and I don't need to get any better. And I'm good. And Harrison Ford had a recent interview on YouTube where he actually, it was a really good interview. If you've ever seen a Harrison Ford interview before, normally everyone talks about Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and he wanted to talk. I mean, they focused on his other films, and you could hear in his voice and just the way he was, you know, talking with I think it was Vanity Fair, is that he was really still wanting to do things. Like he's only worked with one woman director. He wants to do more of that. He played a bad guy in a film. He's only played a bad guy really once, and he's like, I want to do more of that stuff. So the same thing with crafting your time. It's as long as you have time, you're going to craft it. So you might as well craft it the way that you both need and want it to be. So again, the definition of personal productivity to me is as follows, and it's a bit different than I think a lot of people get into. I believe that efficiency and effectiveness are byproducts of productivity. I think that you become more efficient when you have a framework in place, and you become more effective as a result. And hopefully, effective first and efficient second, right? You don't want to be efficient about the wrong things, and you'd like to be effective first. But I think really, when it comes to personal productivity, it boils down to the following, and if you've followed my work before, you know that this is how I feel about it. It's intention. What do you intend to do? And then attention. How are you going to make sure that you have something in place to pay attention to it? So time theming is one of those things. You can time blocking, all of this stuff is one of those ways that you can marry your intention plus your attention, because intention without attention is powerless. You could say, I intend on writing a book, right? Well, if you don't have a framework in place that's going to allow you to consistently pay attention to that, you're not going to get a book done, right? Or if you want to work on a report and you say, my intention is to finish this report. Well, how are you going to pay attention to that? Well, the report is a bigger thing. So you're probably going to want to break it down to smaller components. You're going to want to put it into an app or a planner that's going to allow you to pay attention to it consistently. That's personal productivity. Then you become more efficient and effective with it, because it's the framework that allows you to do that. And that's what time blocking and in turn time theming will allow you to do. So again, the two mindsets that you have to merge. So to live that definition, you need to merge the following mindsets: a time-based mindset. So it forces you to focus on what's urgent. I already touched on that a little bit, but the idea that if somebody gives you something right away, it basically compels you to focus on the urgent matters at hand. So if my child is homesick, it's not something that I can say, well, I'll just deal with you later. Or if my child falls down the stairs, I've used that example before. It's not like I can say, well, I've got a task at hand I'm working on. I'm not going to deal with you right now. And you've got a screaming child in the background. Same thing with if your boss gives you something to work on that's due today, you're now all of a sudden forced to focus on the urgent stuff. But again, you need to merge those two mindsets. So the second mindset is a task based mindset, and that allows you to focus on what's important. So the key differences here are there's a forceful element and there's the urgency, right? With a time based mindset. But with a task based mindset, it allows you to focus on what's important. And that those two meshing together allow you to be personally productive. Again, I don't think I could have written a book if I was using a time-based mindset the whole time. It would not be very good, because I would be, the quality would suffer, because I'd let it go to the last minute. I've talked about this before in my TED talk. Instead of worrying about due dates, DUE dates, try to make every day a due date, DO date. So how do we make sure that we have attention for our intentions? And free time is one of those things. I want to talk a little bit about free time, because a lot of people say, I love having free time, but free time is the enemy of progress. That's Casey Neistat. I actually started listening to an episode of him on the How I Built This podcast just yesterday while I was convalescing at home. And one of the things that whether you like him or don't, this is a wise this is some mindful, wise thinking. Now, again, it doesn't mean that you should rigorously schedule every moment of the day. But what you do need to do is, because it's so objective time, right? Right now it is in my time zone it's 6:54 a.m. But on the East Coast it will be close to 10 o'clock, right, a.m. So we all know how time moves forward, uh, and if you want to make sure that you get the things done that you really need or want to do, even spending time with your family, you need to invest that. Free time is the enemy of progress. If you just whittle away the time, you're not going to be able to move things forward. And time blocking and time theming allow you to do that. You need to invest your free time. So you need to invest it. You need to say, okay, I need to set aside this time that I have available to do whatever I need or want to do. And time theming allows you to do that. So let's get into it. Let's get into the idea of theming your time. So there are 5 elements that I talk about when we talk about theming your time, and I'm going to present them in order. Normally when I do this, I don't do all 5 at once. I generally focus on either the bigger picture ones, so the annual axiom, monthly theming, and weekly sprints, because those are broader, and those are, you're not polishing the runway, as people say. You're not focusing on just the day to day. But I am going to get into the daily theming and the horizontal theming here as well. So these are the 5 elements of time theming, and we're going to go through these in order. And then at the end, as Francis mentioned, we're going to do an exercise. So keep this in mind. And by the way, as a time blocking summit attendee, if that as someone who purchases it, you're going to have access to this stuff. And Francis has all that stuff sorted out. But let's get into it. So the first one, let's talk about the 5 basic guidelines for theming your time. Okay, so when you're thinking about theming your time, and again, these are probably going to be things that you've heard in some way, shape, or form when you talk about time blocking, but it's important to be thoughtful about this up front. Is number one, you need to work backwards from your certainties. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you know that every April it's income tax time, that's a certainty. It's not like next April it won't be happening. If you know that your kids are home from school on the weekends, like mine are, then if you have kids, that is too, then that's a certainty. You know that they're not going to be in school on a Saturday or a Sunday. Here's a great example right now. I know that my kids are going to be sleeping right now. In fact, the entire house is sleeping right now. That's a certainty. I'm very, very rarely, if at all, does anyone get up this early in our house on a Saturday. Okay. So whenever you're theming, you need to think about the things you know to be true consistently. So when I'm working with somebody who's doing, like, say, daily theming, I will tell them to look 3 to 4 weeks ahead, depending on if there's a holiday in there or not, and say, okay, what do you know to be true every week? Well, I know I have a meeting every Monday. Okay, great. Write that down. I don't ask them to write down any of the things that they know that they want to do regularly. I just ask them to work backwards and tell me what they know to be true every single time. So that's something to keep in mind, whether you're doing, the annual axiom, monthly theming, daily theming, all that stuff. Okay. Number 2, this is where people get stuck all the time, is they'll say, well, I can't theme all my days because there's no way I can dedicate an entire Thursday to deep work. When you're theming, you've got to remember that they are funnels or filters for your focus. They give your brain a place to go. So when you wake up first thing in the morning, if you're daily theming as an example, you don't ask yourself, what am I going to do today? Because that's a terrible question to ask your brain, because your brain will, I don't know, or it will look at the urgent stuff, or it will just go check email, or it will do et cetera, et cetera. But if you wake up in the morning and you ask yourself, not what am I going to do today, or what do I need to do today, or do I have to do today? Instead, if you say, well, what day is it? Oh, it's Saturday. Well, what does Saturday mean? What have I defined Saturday as? Oh, it's family day. Okay, well, what family stuff am I going to do today? And then from a personal standpoint, you get to decide what family means. For example, I do things to serve my entire family on Saturdays. So I will hang out with my kids, obviously, but I will also do household chores. We've got some gear to pack up from the event that I did last weekend in Vancouver. I've got a bunch of gear. That's household chores. Household chores generally fall on family day, right? I will also probably hop on Facebook and share some feedback forms for the people who attended the Big Ready, because they are a version of family to me. So you get to decide what that means. That's the subjective, that's the personal part. But if, as an example, yesterday was my planning day and I woke up with a rash that was ridiculous and I'm not feeling well and all that stuff, I don't sit there and go, well, what planning am I going to do today? I will start there. Well, Friday's planning day. What planning can I do? Oh, wait, I feel terrible. Then I start to work in a different way, because I know that I can't necessarily do all the planning, but it gives me a place to start. So just remember that themes are funnels or filters for focus, and that goes for every type of theme that we're going to discuss today. Number 3, don't let abstractions bring on confirmation bias. I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee here. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say that your certainties are that you have meetings every Monday, and that Thursdays are normally a day where you don't have any meetings at all, and Fridays are your kids are at school, but then all of a sudden there's a holiday in there. So the kids are home on Friday. Or all of a sudden, one week you've got a ton of meetings on a Wednesday for some reason. Those are what I call abstractions in your schedule. They're not distractions because they are not some things that came up out of nowhere, and they're also things that you necessarily can't mitigate. But also, they're just things that showed up. But what happens is if you look at your schedule and you see these abstractions, you're like, oh well, there's no way I can theme. Not today. Or oh, and if I can't do it today, then I can't do it ever. Or you know what? I looked at my month and there's no way I can give my month a theme because my month is filled with 2 weeks of my kids being off school, and no, there's just no way I can do it. You got to be careful with the biases. They're the things that are going to get us into trouble. They're the things that get us working sequentially or checking email first thing when we should be maybe looking at the other things first. But you've got to be careful when you're theming that you don't let these abstractions that come along every once in a while bring on confirmation bias. Now, if an abstraction happens consistently, then chances are it was a certainty that you didn't know, or it's a new certainty that you need to keep in mind. But if it's an every so often thing, yeah, you've got to keep that in mind that that's just an aberration. It's an abstraction in your schedule. You really need to remember that. Okay, it's just this day, or it's just this week, or it's just this month. Let's not let this keep me from reaching for the brass ring that I want to reach, which is accomplishing my monthly theme or the weekly sprint or whatever. The fourth thing is to use idea meritocracy strategies as an aid in choosing your themes. So, what do I mean by that is that when you're theming, and I talk about this in my Now Your Action Plan course, is you're writing down all of the elements of your work and personal life that you really want to focus on. So, like, I want to build better relationships, and I want to, have more course programs, and I want to work on a book, and all these different things. And again, these are the things that I do regularly. So maybe I need a daily theme for it. When I say idea meritocracy strategies, let the best ideas rise to the top. So for example, if versions of community or relationship show up consistently when you're trying to give a month a theme, that should give you a clue that you need to actually use that as a monthly theme. And then further to that, well, what month is better for that? And you're going to see in my examples what month might be better suited to focus on relationships based on the certainties that I know that happen every year, right? Or every, if you're doing a daily theme every day. So it's important to use those kind of and the interesting thing is that often it's just you. So it's not like you're bouncing with meritocracy, and Ray Dalio talks about this in principles. It's you're bouncing it off of a bunch of people, right? In this case, you're bouncing it off yourself, but it's that it's that old school brain of like, oh, there's no way I can do all this stuff, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's the active brain that's sitting there going, "Oh yeah, no, we should totally try." So you're bouncing ideas off of like the idealized version of what you want to be, but also the realistic component. So that's where the meritocracy comes in. So you've got to kind of find harmony between the two. So that one might be a little bit harder for you to grok, but the idea is that the best ideas for themes should rise to the top. And remember, there's this book called Necessary Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud, and he talks about the idea of, for a rose bush to thrive, you actually have to cut active, growing, healthy roses, buds, so that the actual rose bush itself can thrive. We often, look at a year and we go, okay, well, I want to accomplish all this in a year. And Tony Robbins has said we often overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in a larger, I think he said 10. I put together the decade designer this year because we've just started a new decade, and it'd be great to say, you know what, I'm going to look at monthly themes, but there's no way that I can write a novel this year based on the fact that I've got a book coming out. So next November is NaNoWriMo. So November 2021, maybe I'll put that in there. And I've actually put that in my decade designer for 2021. So again, when you're putting all these tactics and ideas and strategies out there, you can look beyond the year. It doesn't have to be 2020 that you're looking at. And you don't have to theme everything. That's the fifth thing. There are people that will walk away, and maybe because this is a bit of an edge case, the people that are here, they're going to walk away from here and go, oh, you know what? I have to, I'm going to theme 7 days a week, and I'm going to have 4 horizontal themes and 5 weekly sprints and 12 monthly themes. Please don't do that right out of the gate. I didn't set up all of what you're going to see from me today in one fell swoop. It, again, crafting, it evolves over time. Pick one thing, pick one day, pick one horizontal theme, pick one month, maybe pick two. You don't have to theme everything, and you don't even have to get to the point where you're theming 7 days a week. Again, the one thing about time crafting that I really want to put out there is that unlike other time management systems, which I mean, and I've studied this for well over a decade now, a lot of them, there's this productivity guilt if you don't do all the elements of that system or that framework. And it's hard to overcome that. It doesn't mean that you have to do all of those, but it's right there in front of you. If you're not doing certain things that the prescribed text tells you to do, or the crowd that, you know, really follows a framework tells you to do, then you're not doing it right. With time crafting, if you theme one day of the week, guess what? You're time crafting. If you have one category of mode based work, you're time crafting. Hey, if you're journaling at the end of the day, guess what? You're doing some form of time crafting. So you don't have to theme everything, and please don't theme everything right out of the gate. All right, let's talk about the annual axiom. So, what is the annual axiom? Well, the annual axiom is basically inspirations or mottos or phrases that you will use as an overarching focus or a north star or a guiding principle for your year. And it's going to help you decide what your monthly theme should be, what projects you take on, et cetera, et cetera. So here's some examples of them. And I used to do this thing, which Chris Brogan put out there, which is the 3 words, which is what are the 3 words that you want to have that embody your year. But you know, when I was putting the book together, I had to come up with something that was of my own, and I looked at a bunch of different things, and this is what stuck with me because I remember, and this is a, I remember looking at different sports mottos. I remember looking at like team sports teams, and they had these phrases. And one of the more recent ones is LSU's football team said "one heart, one team, one heartbeat," like things like that. And I'm like, you know, that rallies the troops together to focus on one goal, right? New England Patriots said, "Do your job." Um, in the book, I actually talk about the Houston Astros saying "never settle," but I think that might be why the book's a little bit delayed. We may change that because of the recent. If you follow baseball, the Astros, I think they had other ideas in mind when they were putting their annual axioms or their mottos together. But these are what you can use. And I don't believe in New Year's resolutions. I believe the resolution you should make every year is to be resolute in what you've decided that you need and want to do. But I also don't start my year in January either. I start my year in September, which mirrors my kids' school years. So you could choose any of these as like as your as an annual axiom. And the key here is, you know, make it your own. So here's mine. WITNMW. You're like, what does that mean? Well, it means whatever it takes, no matter what. That's what it means. Whatever it takes, no matter what. And that came to me when I was watching, I believe, an Avengers Endgame commercial. And it was like, whatever it takes, whatever it takes. And then I added the no matter what. And so this is like, if WITNMW is just a shorthand for me to remember that whether it's a monthly theme, a daily theme, whether I'm working by mode, I'm going to live time crafting. I'm going to live my life by the framework I've set out. I'm going to, whatever I set my mind to do something, I'm going to do it, whatever it takes, no matter what. And that means if I can't do it, if I'm looking at a project, like for example, that novel, and I say, you know what, I'm going to do that, whatever it takes, no matter what. And I know that I'm looking at the rest of my year and saying, you know what, I don't think I can't apply that axiom to this particular project. I don't do it. So this is for me, but I mean, again, you're going to have to choose one for yourself. And it could be just a simple word. It could be a phrase. It could be whatever you want it to be. I was watching a Jimmy Valvano video last night on Twitter because, I think just 28 years ago, he passed away of cancer. He's a basketball coach. And he talked about like, don't give up, never give up, or don't give up, don't ever give up. Like that could be your phrase. And then what that does is it tethers it to that person who faced, you know, really lengthy cancer battle. And he also mentored a bunch of kids and coached and was successful in the face of, you know, a team that really wasn't supposed to do all that well. You could use that. So again, it's all about drawing inspiration from a deeper story. Okay. So we're going to move on, and then later we're going to do an exercise that's going to have you theme something, but we're not going to get there yet. Right now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about monthly theming. So when it comes to monthly themes, again, you want to use these idea meritocracy pieces. And I've themed every single month this year. There have been months where I haven't. I've skipped 2 months, but basically what I did was I put all of, and these are my personal ones. I put all of the things that I want to focus on in my personal life out, and I used post-it notes. So I had one color post-it notes for personal, one color post-it notes for professional. And then you'll see here on this slide that I have a couple that are bolded here. And I used a different colored post-it note for that. And those are what I call hybrid themes. And you'll see why in a second. But these are my themes from a couple years ago that you're looking at right now, at least the personal ones. And so, for example, September, I chose running because I wanted to get in shape and I like running. In September, the weather's still nice here. So it was a good month to choose, as opposed to, say, January, which is skating, right? February, travel. The weather's here is not very good at that time of year. So I want to focus on travel in February. Plus, we have a holiday there as well. NaNoWriMo, for example, that month, November is National Novel Writing Month. So that's when I was focusing on that. Uh, if you look further down, April is home improvement. Still, the weather's not that great, so I want to work inside on the home improvement as well as set the table for outside, which then leads to gardening in May and then cooking in June. So you can see that all this does is give me some place to go. So, for example, March is relationships. I know that when I start my day, today is family day. And I'm like, well, what if this was my monthly theme for this year? And it's not this year's monthly theme in March is finance. I would say, okay, it's family day. Well, what family tasks should I do today? Well, what's my monthly theme? My monthly theme is relationships, or in this case, finance or relationships. Okay. Well, what can I do to further that relationship project? Right. Well, if I'm just living up to my daily theme, I'm doing that today. But if I'm doing finance stuff, then I would say, okay, well, let's look around the house and see. I've got a task like let's look and see what we can sell, like some of the stuff we don't use, and put that towards finance. Or let's make a grocery list that we actually use and plan our meals so that way we don't spend too much money. So it just gives me my brain a place to further filter. Okay. And that's what personal themes do. And again, you don't have to do uh, different personal themes and professional themes, because if you take a look and notice how this one says March relationships, last this year, and I didn't change that in the slide, but March it's finance this year for professional themes. So I apologize for the little bit of oddness here. But you look at the ones that are bolded here. Let's look at August, for example, is planning. So that's a hybrid theme, which means in August, every August I plan. Every August I plan. So that means that both personally and professionally, I plan that month. And if you take a look at my professional themes, you can see a lot of these are related around projects, right? Or initiatives. And that you'll notice that personally, they're also around the same thing. Like, I want to get better at running. I want to get better at skating. I want to learn French. They're generally project or area of my life things that I want to work on. Whereas here, these are very project specific to some of them. The time crafting book launch, you'll see there's 5 months of it, right? And then productivity as coaching, that's an area of my business. Then there's the group coaching experience, which is a very specific project. But you could see that in November, when I hit my listening day, which is Tuesday, well, what listening can I do? Let's see. Well, what's my monthly theme? Oh, it's the Beyond Productivity group coaching experience. Oh, I have a couple of audio programs I can put together for those people. Great. So all of a sudden, I'm filtering my to-do list and whittling it down. Okay. So you can see that there are some definite correlations between both personal and professional monthly themes. And you can see that I've got multiples of the same theme happening consistently. So there's that. Okay. So that to me these professional monthly themes and personal themes just keep me going on the same path. They keep me moving forward in a big way, as opposed to just doing like the small things every single day. It gives me something aspirational to look towards. Weekly sprints. So the three elements of a weekly sprint are they are doable in 7 days or less, and they're often a project. So for example, and you'll see some examples here in a minute, but they also override the monthly theme. So if I have a weekly sprint, it's going to override whatever my monthly theme is. So if my weekly sprint, and you'll see here in a minute what one of them is, that means that during that week, I don't go, well, let's look at my daily theme and let's look at my monthly theme. Instead, I said, well, daily, oh, I have a weekly sprint. Well, what's the weekly sprint? And you also need to spread them out over the calendar year. Now, this varies. This last point varies because if you're not doing a lot of monthly themes, you can do more weekly sprints. But I do a lot of monthly themes, as you can see. So I don't do nearly as many weekly sprints. Okay. So here's some weekly sprints that I did this year. So October, week 1, I did the Pressfield Inspired Project, which is my 30 days of time crafting program. And that, if you go back to my professional themes, was YouTube month. So during that first week, I did not, I, my monthly theme was overridden of YouTube by this. Okay. January week 2 was my secret project. It's not so secret anymore. It's the Big Ready. So I focused on that in January. In March, I'm focusing week 3, which is in just 2 weeks from now. I think it's 2 weeks from now. I'm focusing on the bonuses for my book. And then in May, week 1, I'm focusing on the big book launch planning, which, of course, the book coming out in summer. So I want to be far enough ahead with this. So that overrides, if we go to my professional, my time crafting book launch kind of works in tandem. And in March, it also kind of works in tandem. So sometimes the monthly themes can create very specific projects within them. You'll also notice that I'm only showing professional ones here. I could very easily have some personal ones in there as well. All right, moving into daily theming, and we're moving at a bit of a quicker clip here now, but I'm going to be around for Q&A afterwards with so we can dive in very specific questions afterwards. All right, let's go to daily theming, which is where a lot of people start. And here are my daily themes. And again, you use those 5 elements of working backwards from your certainties. That's one of the key components. Here are my 7 days of the week that I allocate. These are my family. So Sunday is family day, and I start my work week on a Sunday, and Saturday's family day as well. Now, if I put free time, then my brain would go all over the place. But I'm focused on family those days, which is what I need to be. And yeah, it may seem obvious to most people. Oh, well, of course you're going to focus on your family on the weekends. Yeah, but again, intention plus attention. There's lots of things that try to vie for our attention every single day. I would rather have that in place as a fail safe because otherwise my brain's going to go where it wants to go. Monday is leveling day, so it's where I, basically clear to neutral, get things sorted. I kind of kick my week off. Used to call that my optimization day, but I found I wasn't doing nearly as much optimization. And leveling is also not just leveling up to me, but also leveling, like killing stuff. So I'm doing like some auditing that day and things like that. Tuesday is listening day. And the reason that Tuesday is my listening day is because my podcast comes out on Wednesday. So I want to make sure that all my podcast stuff is done the day before at the very least. But I'm also doing things like listening to audiobooks, listening to podcasts, maybe going through my podcast list and seeing, which podcasts I don't want to listen to. I'm also going to make phone calls mostly on Tuesdays because that's when I have to listen to people, things like that. Looking day is again mostly video stuff. So I'm making videos for the Friday, or I'm planning my YouTube live for Friday, or I'm working on video strategy, or I'm shooting the video for the next week on YouTube, things like that. But I'm also, I'm maybe looking at my Netflix queue and saying, hey, are these things still things that I want to watch? Or I'm going in and adding things to my Netflix list, or things like that. Anything related to looking, I'm doing on Wednesday. Maybe I'm looking deeper at some of the emails that I got in, people saying, hey, I want to be on your podcast, or hey, I've got to look around and see whose podcast I can be on with a book coming out. Again, I have these here, and I'll share with you how I put those into my planners in a little while. Thursday is deep work day. So that's like basically anything that's going to require a lot of focus, a lot of concentration, right? So I don't have any meetings on Thursdays. No one can book meetings with me on Thursdays. And incidentally, the only day people can book podcast interviews with me is on Tuesdays, right? I also don't do any interviews on Wednesdays because I'm focused on video. I will do coaching calls on Monday and on Wednesday and on Friday because it's my planning day, but I will not do coaching calls on Thursdays. And I will occasionally, I think I do some on Tuesdays now as well because I basically shut down the afternoons so I could focus on some of my horizontal themes, which you'll see in a second. Now, how do I take my daily themes and apply them to my to-do list apps? Well, if you're using a to-do list app, there's tags and there's labels inside of those. So I just basically make sure that, and I'll use Todoist as an example, but there's plenty of them out there. I just make sure that there's tags or labels in Todoist's case that are tags rather. I think they're calling them tags now. I make sure that there's a leveling tag or a leveling label or a looking label. So on Wednesdays, I don't go to like what's due today. That's not my default. My default is let me take a look at the looking tag or label. Oh, here are all the, and then I use the dates as the secondary. Oh, well, this is due sooner, so let me work on that one. Right. So it's the secondary consideration, the dates. Whereas the daily themes give me this place to look first. So instead of looking at the today list, which could be very dangerous, I start with at least my daily theme and then working my way from there. I can hear somebody in the background. Francis, do you need me to make a change here or something?
No, sorry about that. My internet dropped and
Are we good? Okay, cool. Horizontal theming is the next one. Okay, so this one is much like weekly sprints, but it's for the day. So instead of going the entire day, it's hours of the day. So this is where most people talk about time blocking. This is kind of what they discuss. Like the idea of hours of the day. So the 3 elements of a horizontal theme when you're building them is number one, they need to be done regularly and or daily. So for example, if I'm writing like I'm a writer, I should be writing daily. If I don't, then I'm not going to keep the saw sharpened, right? Admin tasks need to be done daily. movement, exercise should be done regularly and or daily. So this anything you're going to be doing regularly or daily, you want to make sure is horizontal. It creates this nice little ribbon across your calendar. Much like the weekly sprint overrides the monthly theme, the horizontal theme overrides the daily theme. So, for example, and you'll see here in a minute, my horizontal themes, when they happen, I go into that modality. I focus on that theme. And then when I come out of it, I go, okay, what day is it? Oh, it's this day. Okay, well, then I should be focused on this kind of stuff. And the final thing is much like weekly sprints should be spread out over the year, horizontal themes should be spread out over the day. So you shouldn't have like 5 of them back to back to back. You should spread them out because otherwise the daily theme really doesn't work for you. Now, again, you don't have to have daily themes either. You might just say, "Hey, I need 3 strips of horizontal themes throughout, the week." And then the daily themes are because your days are too dynamic. You can't do it or you feel like you can't do it. I believe that daily themes are something that everybody can do. Uh, this is what a horizontal theme looks like. So you could see like mine are spread out. So I've got a 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. I go into maintaining mode. And that's all of the like administrative stuff because I'm a low energy guy in the morning. So I'm taking care of all the low hanging fruit. From 12:30 to 2:30, I go into what's called musing mode, which is like reading, research, things like that. That's where I'm doing like, and again, I use these as tags or labels in my task management app. So if it hits musing mode time, 12:30 hits, I go, okay, what can I do that's musing? Oh, here it is. Here they all are. They're all tagged as musing. I need to read this. I need to research that. I need to study that. 2:30 to 3 p.m. So you can see these are back to back. I go into movement mode. So that's where I'll go and do some exercise, right? And that's really important to me because I'm getting older and I need to make sure I'm keeping myself in shape. And a lot of that's going for a walk. Sometimes it's a higher intensity exercise, something like that. Most more gentle than anything else, yoga, things like that. And then there's a long wait until 10 p.m. until 12 a.m. when I go into making mode. And that's when I'm like taking what I've learned throughout the day and making something out of it because I'm a night owl. So when I hit making mode at 10 p.m., it overrides deep work. It overrides leveling. It overrides listening or looking. And that's how I use these horizontal themes. So as we get closer to the end here, there are 5 elements of time theming that I want you to focus on. And again, you don't have to do all 5 of these. You could say, hey, Mike, you know what? Daily theming, I love the idea, but I can't do it for all 7 days. Pick one. Hey, I love the idea of horizontal theming, but I can't do it 7 days a week. We'll do it 4 days. These are the elements of time theming. It gives your brain a place to go. And if you're looking at the way that this kind of floats, is horizontal theming is the most granular, right? It's hours of the day. Daily themings are days of the week. Weekly sprints are weeks of the year. Monthly theming is months of the year. And annual axiom is years of your life or your decade. And of course, there's the decade designer, which I just designed this year. So at the end of the day, when you're putting these things together, the important thing is to remember those 5 rules. Number one, work backwards from your certainties. Number two, use idea meritocracy when putting them together. Remember that don't let abstractions throw you off, right? Don't let them kind of determine like, hey, you know what? I can't theme this month, or I can't theme this day, or I can't theme any months, or I can't theme any days. And then finally, remember that you don't need to do all of these things. You can pick one, pick two, pick three, and let it grow with you. Okay. I'm a big believer. This has allowed me to do a lot of things. It's allowed me to write books. It's allowed me to coach people. It's allowed me to spend time with my family. It's allowed me to have focus every single day, awareness, clarity, all those things that you need to have quality work. And interestingly enough, like I said, this week I was not able to do nearly enough of this time theming stuff on Friday because of my me being ill. But what's interesting is when you pick up my book, or if you heard my work before and I talk about mode based work, the first category of mode based work is theme based. So you can use these as a catalyst to work by modality. And actually, when you're in horizontal theming, I'm often doing that. Maintaining. Let me see what maintaining I can do. Let me see what movement I can do. Let me see what making I can do. And I go from there. All right, so let's get into an exercise. I want you to theme something. Anything. You can theme, again, going back here. You can theme a month. And the way you would do that is you would write down all 12 months of the year, grab a sheet of paper, write down all 12 months. And you could do it personally or professionally. And you could write down your certainties, excuse me, for that month, for each month rather. The things you know to be true. When's your birthday? When's the holidays? When are your kids out of school? When do you like to, when do you have travel planned? Things like that. And then you can, kind of put ideas of the projects and or areas of focus that you want to have during those months, right? You could theme those. Or you could say, I'm going to theme my days. What are the things that I need to do consistently for my life? And by the way, you'll notice in daily themes, all of those apply not just in my work life, but my personal life. I can level personal stuff. I can listen, making phone calls. I can call my mom, right? Looking, I can watch personal TV stuff. Deep work, that's not just for personal stuff. Planning day, I can plan meals, right? Theme something. That's what I want you to do. And I guess I'm going to get out of this and stop sharing so that we can do that. And everyone can see everything. That's great. So if you guys are starting to work on that exercise, I'd love for you to say, yep, I'm on it. And then tell me what you're going to try to theme, whether it's the annual axiom, whether it's the monthly theme, whether it's a daily theme. You're going to do an annual axiom, Olga. That's great. It's great. I'd love to see that. I will tell you that as you do this, the key, most important thing is to write down those certainties, is the things that you know to be true. Make sure that you get those down. And things that you may not even think about, like your spouse's birthday, your partner's birthday. Great, Kathy. Glad you're working on daily themes. And again, try to make those daily themes universal so that they don't just apply to your work life. Because there's nothing worse than coming home from work and then saying, okay, what am I going to do now? And not having a place for your brain to go. Right. That's why I love the idea of having listening day, because when I'm done work, I can go, who am I going to call today? What am I going to listen to? I now listen to more audiobooks that are fiction than nonfiction because it helps me, kind of get a bit more perspective on things. I generally listen to audiobooks that are personal. Yeah. Thanks, Kathy, for showing up early. Whew. I got plenty of sleep last night. I was telling Francis and Raymond before we jumped on this that I actually went to bed at 8 p.m. I set aside craft deep work times during my day. Okay, so those are horizontal themes then, I would imagine, Brett. Absolutely. All right. Let's go back to the chat here. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks, Brett. Got a lot of great stuff coming on the podcast too. That and actually, that's a really good point. So here's the thing that theming, and thanks for bringing that up. Just spurred something in me. When you have daily themes, the great thing is that you have a default for where tasks should land. So every Tuesday, whatever I get done Tuesdays related to the podcast, if I don't get it done that Tuesday, you know where it goes? The default day is not tomorrow; it's the next Tuesday. Now, if I was doing a daily podcast, I would probably have it default to the next horizontal theme of probably making, right? Or I would maybe even be more deliberate and say, okay, well, I do audio. But here's the thing is that you have to kind of find your just right. I call this like the Goldilocks factor. So if something's too hard, it's too narrow, you're going to run out of tasks to do. So keep that in mind in your theming as well. If it's too soft, like home, if you work from home, that's too wide. It's too big. Your list isn't filtered enough. So you want to find your just right. So for example, if I don't get my podcast stuff done on Tuesday, I don't say, oh, well, I guess I better do this tomorrow. There are sometimes some tasks that bleed into the next day or later in the week. That's where horizontal themes help me. But by and large, I won't touch the podcast stuff again until the following Tuesday. As a matter of fact, I've gotten so kind of habitual about this that when I get podcast guest requests, I just snooze the email to the following Tuesday because I know that's the day where I'm focused on it. So thanks for bringing that up, Brett, because that's a real key thing to remember is theming also helps you decide where tasks should land so that when you're putting something or deciding on a date you want to do something, it gives it a default date as opposed to something that's a lot more arbitrary. Okay. How we doing, everybody? We're almost at the half hour mark. Does anyone want to share one of their themes that they've come up with? And then maybe we'll move to the main area because can we do dual months? So you mean back to back, like so for example, like two themes in a month? I would say that it's probably better, like a personal theme and a professional theme is fine, right? Because they're two distinct areas of your life. And I'm a big believer in like work life harmony, not so much balance. if you're going to do 2 professional themes in a month, I would say that that's more likely that you're going to, those are weekly sprints. So what you could do, and you notice that I said time crafting book launch was one of them, but then I had a very specific weekly sprint for an aspect of that book launch. That's how I would probably do it, is say I'm going to focus on the book launch this month, but then, oh, I have a weekly sprint that's very distinctly going to be focusing on one project. Does that make sense, Olga? The reason that you want to do it in months and or single weeks is that it gives your brain, there's a very distinct like shift with your brain. It goes, okay, this month I focus on this week I focus on this, as opposed to, well, for the next 2 weeks. It just gets too, it's the same thing when I talk to people about mode based work. They go, well, this is a 5 minute task, 10 minute, 15, 20, 35. All of a sudden you've got like 17 different time increments. Simple, I think simple is the best way to go. All right, we can bring everybody into the general. I think Francis, if you want, now we can bring everybody to the general area. I think we're at the top. We're at the half hour mark.